In 8.8, we're going to talk about credit cards. So this is the end of our chapter 8, and I know you're all familiar with credit cards. Basically, your credit card allows you to purchase something now, pay for it later. The problem is oftentimes people can go into debt very quickly with credit cards. So when you make payments on your credit card, that's an example of an open-end installment loan, meaning the payments are not fixed because the payments that you make on your credit card depends on the balance that you owe, so the amount of purchases you had, and the interest rate on your credit card. When we compute interest, we're using the simple interest formula. Interest is equal to PRT. This time R is going to be the monthly interest rate, not an annual or yearly interest rate. T is in months, not years. And that's because your statements are given to you monthly. So a typical monthly interest rate is about 1.57%. Now, if we multiply that by 12, then we actually have an annual percentage rate of 18.84%, which is extremely high. And in general, interest rates on credit cards will be much higher than the interest rates on mortgages or car loans and such. So, since it has such a high interest rate, make sure that your balances are paid off as quickly as possible because you don't want to incur a lot of interest cost. So, customers are typically billed monthly. They receive an itemized billing. That would include your unpaid balance on the first day of your billing cycle, so anything carried over from the previous month. Total balance owed on the last day of the billing period, which means it adds up all your transactions. A list of purchases and cash advances that you made during the billing period, any finance charges or fees, the date of the last day of the billing period, payment due date, minimum amount due. If you happen to pay off the entire amount of your purchase by your due date, you will not be charged interest. So that's always the best thing to do, is pay off all or at least most of what you've charged so you don't get a high interest cost. However, that's different when you make a cash advance. So when you make a cash advance, you pay interest from the day the money is advanced until the day it is repaid. The most common calculation for credit card interest is by what we call the average daily balance method. The formula is given below in this box. And again, remember we're using interest is I equal to PRT, R is monthly interest rate, T is considered 1 month. So P is what we call the average daily balance. To figure out the average daily balance, and since it is an average, in mathematics, when we figure out an average, we always take some total and we divide it by how many we have. So what we're totaling or summing is the unpaid balance for each day of the billing period. So you're going to take every single day of your billing period and you're going to add up all those balances for each day. And then you just divide by the number of days in the billing period. So if your billing cycle is a month, then it's probably going to be 30 days or 31 days unless it's February. In example 1, I've actually completed the table. Usually when I do problems, I write out the solutions, but when it comes to tables and charts, you don't want to see me freehand draw one of those. In example 1, we have a Visa card. It has a monthly interest rate of 1.4% of the average daily balance. The following transactions occurred during the month of May, so from May 1st through May 31st, and that's going to be our billing period. So in this particular table, we have the description of our transaction and we have the dollar amount. So we know that the previous balance from the previous month was $1,400. So that's our starting balance. Our billing cycle starts on May 1st. In this particular example, we made a payment on May 8th, which means that's going to be a credit. That's going to be subtracted from our balance of 1400. But then May 10th, 15th, 25th, we made charges, so those dollar amounts are going to be added to our balance. The end of our billing period is May 31st, and we have a payment due June 9th. In part A, it says find the average daily balance. In this case, we're going to round to the nearest cent, so 2 decimal places. This table is the beginning of part A. Your textbook typically does the calculations with 2 tables. I just use 1. So remember, the goal here is to first sum up the balance for each day of the billing cycle. If we look at this table, for this date of May 1st, our balance was $1,400. That's what we started out with. So how long was our balance at $1,400? Well, the next transaction was on May 8th. Going back to our table, on May 8th, we made a payment of $300, which means we're going to subtract $300 from our balance of $1,400. So our new balance on May 8th is $1,100. So the question becomes, how many days was our balance at $1,400? Well, that would be May 1st through May 7th, which is 7 days. So for 7 days, our balance was at $1,400. So if I multiply 1,400 by 7, I get the total amount for those 7 days as $9,800. May 8th, the new balance is $1,100. On May 10th, we made a charge at Best Buy for $350. So that means we're going to add $350 to our balance of $1,100 to get a new balance on May 10th of $1,450. So the question becomes, that $1,100 that we had on May 8th, that balance, how many days was it at $1,100? Well, it was at $1,100 from May 8th through May 9th, which is 2 days. So when I multiply the $1,100 by 2, I get $2,200. Ooh, the green's going to bother me. I have to put this in green too, so it matches. Now our new balance of $1,450 is going to remain until we have our next transaction on May 15th, which is another charge at Safeway. It was $80.69. So we take our balance, we add the $80.69 to get a new balance of $1,530.69. So going back to the previous row where we had a balance of 1,450, the question is, how long do we have that balance? Well, we had it May 10th through May 14th, which is 5 days. Multiply that balance by 5 to get $7,250. May 15th, our new balance, 1530.69, is going to remain until our next transaction on May 25th. On May 25th, we had a charge at Zippy's of $65.78. So we're going to add that to our balance, and on May 25th, our new balance is $1,596.47. So the question becomes, how long was the balance $1,530.69? Well, that was May 15 through May 24th, which is 10 days. Multiply that out, and we have $15,306.90. There were no other transactions, and the billing cycle ended on May 31st. So the balance of 159647 remained from the 25th through the 31st, which was 6 days. multiply that out to get $9,578.82. So the total amount for our average or for our daily balances would be, if we total up this column here. So if we total up the 9,800, 2,200, and so on, we end up with this total at the bottom. Oops. $44,135.72. So that's the sum of our daily balances. Now to figure out the average daily balance, we have to take the sum of our daily balances and we have to divide it by the number of days in the billing cycle, which in our case is May, so there's 31 days. When we do that division, we end up with $1,423.73. So this total is our average daily balance. So our average balance, and that makes sense with the numbers that you see here. So our average daily balance would be $1,423.73. So that was question part A. So B says find the interest to be paid. And this would be going back to previous sections. When we find the interest that we're going to be paid, remember our interest is 1.4%. That's our monthly interest. So the interest is going to be that formula PRT, where P is our average daily balance, which we figured out would be 1,423.73. So we're going to multiply that by the rate of 1.4%, which would be 0.014. And then we want to multiply it by T, but remember T is 1 month. So we're going to multiply this by just 1. In our calculator, rounded to the nearest cent, I get $19.93. So that would be my part B. Find the interest to be paid as of June 1st. Part C says find the balance due as of June 1st. Ooh, don't want that. So the balance due at the beginning of June would be your ending balance, but you're going to add the interest. So it's the balance that you ended up with plus the interest that you have to pay. Oh, that's a weird T. So the balance that we ended with was the last balance we computed, 1,5, let's go back to the table. It would be here, the 1,59647. And we're going to add our interest of $19.93. So the starting balance on June 1st would be $1,616.40. And now when we go to D, it says this card requires a minimum payment of $20 if the balance is less than 400. Well, our balance from Part C is not less than 400, so we don't pay a minimum payment of $20. Otherwise, the minimum due is 1/36 of the balance due at the end of the billing period. So it's 1/36 of what we got in Part C. So that's the same as saying you take the dollar amount from Part C and you divide it by 36. So, oops, do it all the time. So you take 1616.40, divide it by 36, And again, we're going to be rounding it to the nearest dollar amount. This one is fine. I don't have to round. It's 4490. So that would be the minimum payment due for this particular credit card. Let's look at another example. So we were looking at monthly payments and how to figure them out for our credit card. For this next example, we're going to change it up a little bit. So example 2, suppose your credit card has a balance of $3,800 and an annual rate. So careful, this is an annual rate, not a monthly rate, of 18.6%. You decide to pay off the balance over 3 years. If there are no further purchases to the card, how much must you pay each month? Okay, so think about this. This is a little bit different. The average daily balance is going to remain the same, right? We're not making any new purchases. So what we're going to do in this particular example is we're going to go straight to what we used in the previous section to figure out what the payments would be. Remember that payment formula was P times R over N over 1 minus parentheses 1 plus R over N. The exponent was negative NT. And that's because we're not using the card. We're not making any new purchases. And then we can just go ahead and use our yearly interest rate or annual interest rate of 18.6%. So in this case, my R is the 18.6%. So as a decimal, it's going to be 0.186. N, for this particular formula, remember N is the amount of times you compute per year. So since this is monthly payments, N is 12. So again, we're just going back to what we used in previous sections. Our P is our starting balance of 3800. And since we want to pay this card off in 3 years, T is 3. Putting those values into our formula, we have 3800 times 0.186 over 12 divided by 1 minus 1 plus 0.186 over 12. And the exponent would be a negative 12 times 3. Now when I put that in my calculator, and I'm going to go ahead and not round it to the nearest cent. I'm going to round to the nearest dollar amount when I'm figuring out my payments. So this is going to be $139. So if I pay $139 each month, within 3 years, that balance is going to be paid off. That would be my part A. Let's look at part B. So B, how much total interest will you pay? Again, exactly the same thing we did previously. We take our monthly payments of $139 times 12, because we make 12 payments per year. We're paying for 3 years. So the total amount that we've paid is going to be $5,004. Now, the balance that we started with was 3,800. So the difference between those is $1,204. That would be the interest that we paid. And when you look at the balance we started out with, paying about $1,200 in interest, that's almost a third. That's high. So let's finish up our discussion on credit cards and look at why are we using a credit card? If it's so easy to go in debt and if there's such high interest rates, what are the advantages? and also the disadvantages to using a credit card. Well, when you think about the advantages, that means you can use a product before you actually pay for it. And if you do happen to pay off your entire balance, you don't get charged interest. It also builds your credit. Convenient. You don't have to carry cash. Much more convenient than checks. And also for credit cards, you get consumer protection. In the case that you have to dispute of a dispute, there it is, or a fraudulent charge. Had to be a typo somewhere. It's a good source of an emergency funds, especially if you're traveling. It allows you to make purchases over the phone or the internet. Oftentimes, if you're, again, traveling, if you want to rent a car or book a hotel room, it's much easier. And in some cases, it's impossible without a credit card. So some tasks are much easier to complete if you have a credit card. When you look at your monthly statements, it helps you keep track of your spending. And some cards offer amenities such as free miles towards air travel and so on. Your credit card can also be used as a second form of ID if you need to provide that. So the disadvantages, and we've talked about some of these, high interest rates. I've seen credit cards as high as 30% on unpaid balances. And there's what we call no cap on interest rates. So when you think about a mortgage, the interest rates are federally regulated, but for credit cards, these are private companies, they can charge whatever they want. There is no cap on the interest rates. They could charge you 50% for your interest rate, and there's nothing you could do about it. There's also no cap on fees, so be real careful when you apply for a credit card. Oftentimes, there'll be a fee to set up the account. You may have an annual or membership fee that's charged every year. You may even have a monthly service fee. And this typically happens when you're applying for credit and you actually have no credit, maybe your first credit card. They typically will throw in some fees. Sometimes they'll have a program fee. So if there is an amenity like free miles, they might actually charge you to be part of that program. It's also very easy to overspend. When you have a credit card, it's not like you see that balance taken out of your account every month. So you have this false sense of security and you could overspend, which can lead to financial trouble. And there's also this minimum payment trap. So your credit card will tell you the minimum amount that you're supposed to pay. Well, that minimum amount is very deceptive because if you only pay the minimum amount, most of the payment will go to interest, which means you're actually not really paying off your balance. I did want to make a comment about debit cards. These are not credit cards. Purchases are deducted straight from your bank account, so they should be treated as a check. And the last thing we want to talk about is your credit report and your score. So there are big advantages to having a credit card. Many things in life are very hard to get without credit scores or a credit report. So once you apply for your first credit card, your credit report will begin. So a credit report contains the following information. It contains identifying information like name, social security number, current and previous addresses, a record of credit accounts. So it's details about open and closed credit accounts that you have. It includes the balances you have on your credit cards, the date you opened your credit cards, and your payment history. Public record information. So if you've had a bankruptcy, anything that's public record will also be on your credit report. Collection agency account information. So if any of your unpaid accounts was turned over to a collection agency, that will be there. And inquiries. So any company or even an employer that request a credit background check on you, that will also show up on your credit report. So credit bureaus collect information and provide credit reports to potential lenders, sometimes employers, and actually any others upon request. There's three main credit bureaus: Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. So at any time, if you want to obtain a free copy of your credit report, you can go to annualcreditreport.com, and I think you're allowed to get a free credit report from the three bureaus. It's either every 6 months or every year. They have a time period where they won't charge you for it, so it's free. So it's important that you maintain your credit, and credit bureaus will score you based on the data from your credit report, and you'll get a credit score from each one of the three, which gives you your FICO score. So credit score, FICO score, pretty much the same thing. The higher your score, the better your credit. So if you have a high FICO score, then when you apply for credit cards, mortgage, car loans, things like that, you'll get a better interest rate. And in fact, if you don't have a good credit score, oftentimes when you apply for, say, a homeowner's loan or a mortgage, you'll be denied. So let's look at your credit worthiness. So in general, if your score is between 720 and 850, that means good to excellent. You'll get the best interest rates on loans, and in fact, you'll probably get approved very easily for something like a mortgage or a car loan. So 650 to 719, it's good. So you'll get credit, but maybe not the best interest rates. 630 to 649, fair. You might get credit, but higher rates. 580 to 629, that's poor. You'll probably be denied credit by all but maybe the highest interest lenders. And then 300 to 579, that's really bad. Probably going to be denied credit. That is it for this section, and that's it for chapter 8. So our next chapter is going to be probabilities, chapter 11. Now remember, each one of the chapters in Math 100, they stand alone. So let's say you weren't into personal finance, chapter 8. Well, maybe probabilities will be much more interesting for you. And that's it.